As men, especially as doctors, sometimes we hyper-focus on our career, neglecting other facets of our lives. But that is about to change. This is Dads Before Doctors. Some physicians claim their family is their top priority, but their lives tell a very different story. We'll help each other become family men who are doctors rather than doctors who have families. If it's health, wealth and legacy, emotional well-being, parenting, professional goals, or marriage, we're talking about it. Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe. This is Dads Before Doctors, and this is your host, Adam Broussard, MD.
All right, welcome back to Dads Before Doctors podcast. Today, our guest is Mr. Dan Sheeks. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Adam. Great. Glad to be here. Excited to record a podcast with you. Thanks.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, in a nutshell, my wife and I and our son live in Denver, Colorado. I've been in Colorado for a little over 20 years. My main gig is that I am a high school business teacher. I teach in a public high school in the south suburbs of Denver. I've been doing that for 19 years, and I do love my job. It's a great job, and I love hanging out with teenagers all day, every day. It's a lot of fun. And then my wife and I also invest in real estate. We've been doing that for a few years, and we've done fairly well with that. A few years ago, I also started an online community for young people who are interested in early financial independence. My wife and I found that movement, I guess, in those communities about 5 or 6 years ago. And so I wanted to start one for teenagers or at least young people. I like to say 15 to 25. So that community is called Sheeks Freaks. And I also wrote a book for that same age, that same target market called First to a Million. And it was published by Bigger Pockets, which I'm super grateful for. The book just came out a couple weeks ago, early December 2021, and that's probably the main stuff in a nutshell. Yeah,
awesome, and it was a great read. It was a pretty quick read too, even at not quite being a teenager. I found it really helpful, and I think others will too. So, what made you decide to write the book?
The book kind of combines a few of my passions. If you add up, first of all, working with young people, obviously that's something that I love to do, being a teacher. The idea of early financial independence and that community that's out there, which is growing really fast. Personal finance education, which is also a passion of mine, and real estate investing. Honestly, kind of all or passive income, kind of all combined into this book. The book it's not about real estate investing. That's a small piece of the book. It does talk about it. And I just saw there was a need there. There's a lot of great personal finance books for teenagers. And there's a lot of great early financial independence books for adults. But there really is until my book, there really was no book for teenagers specifically about early financial independence, which I consider kind of a niche of the personal finance genre. And so I just thought it was something that was needed. And the mission of the book is just to help young people become aware that there are other options than the typical 9 to 5 till you're 65 grind. And so that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's definitely a needed topic. I know myself and many of my friends didn't find the, financial freedom fire, whether it's just financial independence or you choose to retire early or not. I don't think a lot of people find that until they're in a job that they may or may not like, or, all of a sudden they something happens to them, whether it's a birth of a child, getting married, whatever, and then that's when all of a sudden this becomes really important to them, and then end up trying to do it at all costs.
Mhm.
And I don't know that that is the right method either. And in the book, you chatted about trying to still enjoy, some of the activities that you find fun. And I think that was a great part that to kind of balance it out. So I feel like a lot of people are kind of one way or the other. And
yeah, the path to early financial independence for anybody, including young people, shouldn't be one, in my opinion, where we are sacrificing our happiness in the present for a future goal. It should still very much allow us to be happy and indulge and spend on the things that we value while we're going down that path to early financial independence. So yeah, I'm glad you noticed that in the book. That's a very important piece of the book.
so how, as a high school teacher, did you end up connecting with Bigger Pockets to publish this book?
A little bit lucky as far as geographically lucky. I am in Denver, Colorado, and Bigger Pockets headquarters is also in Denver, Colorado. So my initial connection with them was at a meetup. They had this is maybe going back, at least 6 years, probably 5-6 years. They had a meetup at Bigger Pockets that was, they had it on their website, and my wife and I had just kind of found that community and were really diving into all their resources, their podcasts and their blogs and their books and stuff. And we thought, well, that'd be cool. Let's go to Bigger Pockets headquarters and maybe we'll meet some people there from Bigger Pockets. And then also just, it's always good to network. So we went to that meetup. We did meet a bunch of people that were just from around the community. But one of the guys I met was a 25-year-old brand new employee of Bigger Pockets. His name is Craig Kurlop. At the time, he had just started working at Bigger Pockets, and we had a short conversation with him, and I was really impressed with all the things he was doing around. He had just bought a house hack, his first one, frugality, side hustles, and he was on a journey to early FI. And so I said to him later on, actually in an email, I said, I want you to come talk to my classes, my senior classes at my high school, and talk to them about these different strategies that you're using for your journey to early financial independence. And he said, absolutely. So he came in and it went really well. And then I said, Craig, I want you to come back next year, but how do you feel about coming back on a regular basis, maybe every other month or so? And he said, yeah, sure. And he said, I think my boss, Scott Trench, would want to come in as well, because he's also interested in sharing this message with young people. And I was like, that sounds great. So they've been coming in regularly for the last 3 or 4 years, minus 1 year for COVID when no one was allowed no guests were allowed on campus. So that was my initial connection with them. And they still come into my classroom and talk to my kids. But that wasn't how I got the book published. I mean, that was a totally separate application process. When I first submitted the book idea to Bigger Pockets, they said no. And as they should have, because I really had no proof or no backing to say the book would actually be successful. But they gave me some feedback and said, if you can build a following, if you can build a community, if you can show us some of your writing skills through these different strategies, then maybe we'll consider it. So it took me about 6 or 9 months to do those things they recommended. I resubmitted the book idea, and then they said yes. That's
awesome. Congratulations, especially Thanks. That perseverance of coming back the second time. So because we are, a community of mostly physicians and probably listeners, we tend to have taken the more traditional path. We've gone to med school, undergrad, put in our time. And a lot of physicians tend to get a late start on investing and starting on to financial independence. What would you recommend for those guys that are now, 35, 40, and now they're starting to look at this?
That is a good question. And I would speak to that just from my own personal experience, because I didn't find the early financial independence movement until I was in my early 40s. And I I didn't really start investing until I was in my early 30s. And so, the advice I would give is start now, and start learning, start reading, listening to podcasts like this. Physicians, I have some friends that are doctors. And this is probably a very general statement. I'm sure not all your listeners would align with this, but I think as a physician, you make great money, and that's coming from a public school teacher. So I'm jealous of your salaries for sure. But I think along with that is that lifestyle inflation tendency to spend it all. And that's the American way, honestly. We, through marketing messages and society in general, and especially now with social media, we tend to, we're taught that we deserve to spend everything we make. So if you make $150,000 a year as a physician, then you get to spend $150,000. If you make $500,000 a year, then you get to spend $500,000 a year. That you deserve it. You earned it. And there's nothing wrong with that if you want to work till you're 65. The early five movement would say, pay yourself first, a large portion of that income, meaning you're saving it and investing it for your future, and live on the rest. And so you may not have the biggest house, the nicest car, the most luxurious vacations, but those minor sacrifices now will pay huge dividends in the future, maybe decades of your life back, as far as not having to work. You absolutely can work till you're 65, but having the option where you don't have to, I think, is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a growing trend of physicians finding some of this space. And yes. Like I said, I think that it's just a matter of, I know some clients that I've had with coaching and stuff trying to balance, like we chatted about earlier, if they, a lot of times physicians get out and they're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or everything's going to be better when I'm a resident or when I'm an attending or when I'm a partner or whatever, and realize that if you're not in the right mindset, it's not going to change. So then they start trying to just buy as much real estate as possible, or save 90% of their income and work all this extra, shifts and whatnot to get out as fast as possible, but neglect their health and their relationships. And
yeah, and I'd like to add on to that, Adam. I think you nailed it. I think a lot of not just physicians, but people in corporate America, the private sector, find that the job they end up with isn't maybe exactly how they pictured it. It's not as maybe enjoyable. It's more hours than what they envisioned. And I think doctors probably maybe a little more so than the rest, because I think the personality type, the mindset of someone who would work that hard at an education to become a doctor, it's tough. That's a lot of school. That's a lot of time in a hospital, as a resident. And it's not, not everyone can do that. And so just by the nature of going through that process of becoming a doctor, these are, you all are very driven, work-oriented people. And then, your job can take much more than 40 hours a week. And I think physicians are probably more likely to say, okay, I guess I'll just do that, when, keeping things in balance, I think, is a key to happiness, and a job should be, second or third fiddle to things like family and friends and happiness. So, working that 40-hour a week mark is probably pretty tough as a doctor. And spending time with your family and your kids should be a higher priority, but it's sometimes easier said than done.
So my kids are fairly younger. So I have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. Probably young to start talking about financial independence with them. But what do you recommend for the guys that do have younger kids, 5 to 10 or something? Is there anything that we can do at this point to help start with that mindset, or just a general kind of financial literacy?
Yeah. There's so many things we can do as parents. And I'm with you, Adam. I have a 7-month-old son. We just have the one kiddo right now. So I changed a very, very poopy diaper today that was a complete blowout. And I'm sure you've been there, and the other dads have too. Yeah, I mean, it starts with the way we talk about money in our households. You know, we can't keep it a secret. We can't make money a taboo subject. We have to be very open with our kids about money. And every household is like a small business. There's income and there's expenses continuously going in and out. And so when your kids are, 10, 11, 12, start including them in some of the conversations around the household bills, the household expenses. Go over your paycheck with them, talk about what the household budget looks like, have them help you pay your bills online. When you do pay your bills every month, have them help you, have them click the mouse, have them navigate through the websites to, with your supervision, of course, to pay those bills and to kind of get a feel of what it's like. Show them where you're investing money and why it's there and why it's not somewhere else. And you don't have to have all the answers. I guarantee you know more than your 10 or 15-year-old child. So that you do have something to teach them, even if you don't know everything about personal finance. And having discussions at the dinner table, while you're driving in the car, while you're out for a walk. There's so many things we can do to make money and personal finance a normal part of our daily life, a normal part of conversation, where most of the time in our society, it's kind of a taboo subject and it's not ever discussed. So just make sure that you talk about it with your kids.
And if we're on this, drive for financial independence, as physicians, I know we've discussed this as a group in GoBundance that we're both part of. Our children will probably grow up in a different set of circumstances than a lot of people that have that really strong drive to either escape something or go to something. It may just more privileged upbringing. How do you, instill some of these financial independence principles that you discuss in the book do require some sacrifice. And you discuss going to community college or going to the state college instead of going to a private school or living with parents during college or things like that. How do you instill those things in your teenager, your college student, when they've had a fairly privileged upbringing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it begins with what I talked about earlier, having money discussions very early, and then it would continue into their teenage years and maybe into college with more responsibility on them. And so I want to talk about a strategy that I've heard of, but I have not employed myself. So disclaimer that I have not done this myself, but I do plan on doing it with my son when he's old enough. And this strategy is a little bit extreme, but I think it's pretty amazing idea. And the idea is that when let's say you have a child who's 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there, and you've been talking to him for a while, or at least you feel that they're responsible enough to take this on. And it can go in phases, by the way. But basically what you do is you start paying your child a stipend. And it would be probably pretty sizable, honestly, because you're going to have a conversation with them and say, from here on out, and the first of a year could be a good time to do it, or maybe on their blank birthday, 15th, 16th birthday, this would start. And you say, from here on out, you are responsible for your finances. And I will help you as your parent. I will guide you. I will answer questions, but it is on you now. You get to live here for free, and you get to eat food in this household for free, and that's it. So anything you eat here is free, which means everything else that any other money spent on that teenager is now handled by them. And so you begin by opening a joint checking account with your son or daughter and a joint savings account with them as well, because they can't do that till they're 18. And you're giving them this monthly stipend. Maybe it's $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, depending on what they have going on in their lives, because they're paying for example, if you go out to eat as a family, you're asking the waiter or waitress for separate checks. And so your 15-year-old son or daughter is paying for their own meal out of their own checking account with their own debit card. And trust me, they will look at the menu differently when they know it's their money. They won't just order whatever they feel. They'll start looking at some prices. They'll start thinking about, is that really that much better than this entree? Do I really want to spend an extra $5? Maybe I don't. And like a vacation. So if the family is heading to Disney World, the 15-year-old's paying for their fair share. So they pay for maybe a third or a quarter of the hotel room. They pay for their share of gas. They pay for their share they pay for their own ticket to get into the park. And you start having conversations with them about, okay, you need to budget for your year coming up. We're going to Disneyland in 6 months. It's going to cost you quite a bit of money. Let's research together how much a hotel costs, how much a ticket costs, what transportation is going to be like, whether you want to buy popcorn inside Disneyland, that's going to be $5. Do you want to do that? And how much do you need to have saved up? I'm giving you $2,000-$3,000 a month, whatever it is, but you can't spend all that every month. Or when it comes time to go to Disneyland, you're not going to be able to go with us. And so give them the responsibility to manage their finances while they're in the house with you. It's a much safer environment for them to make mistakes and learn when they're under your supervision, rather than when they're at college or beyond, when we tend to make some big mistakes and no one's there to help us out. No one's there to answer questions. So again, this isn't something I've done, but it's something I plan on doing.
That's awesome.
They pay for their soccer camp. They pay for their uniform. They pay for their school supplies. They pay for their clothes. They pay for their shoes. Again, you're giving them enough money to make it work. The idea isn't to deprive them, but you're also placing on them the responsibility to manage their money so they can, and they'll have to make some choices. Don't give them $10,000 a month so that, they just buy whatever they want. Make it so that they have to make some tough choices sometimes.
That's awesome. That's a great exercise. I think that would definitely something I'm going to take note of in, 12 years. That's awesome. So with this and, the shooting for early financial independence, is college worth it?
That's a great question. That's getting debated more and more. I think rightfully so, because of rising college tuition costs and, just is the return on investment worth it for a college education? So in my book, First to a Million, I have a couple chapters about college. They were really difficult to write because it's a really personal and sometimes emotional choice about whether to go to college or not. First of all, I don't tell anyone what to do. My book is about early financial independence and the strategies to get there. That can include college or it doesn't have to. It could be a 2-year degree. It could be someone just working straight out of high school. So my book goes over college through the lens of, if you want to achieve early financial independence, here are the pros and cons of going to college, of getting a 4-year degree, let's say. And if you do decide to go to college, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think for most people, that's probably a good idea. If you do decide to go, there's another chapter about how do you do college the freakish way, which is kind of the theme of the book, in a way that will help align with your goal of early financial independence. So, obviously, if you want to be a physician, if that's been the young person's dream since they were 10, then you got to go to college. If you want to be a teacher, you got to go to college. If you want to be an engineer, you got to go to college. But not many young people, and this is from my direct experience with seniors in high school, hundreds of them year after year, not many young people really know what they want to do. They might have an inkling, but they don't. And I was the same. When I went to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I majored in business just because it seemed like it was a great way to make money. That's all. That was my only basis for that decision of that major. So I would challenge parents that if your high school junior, senior is really, if they have no clue what they want to do, then allow them to take a gap year. I'm a big fan of the gap year, where young people can try out some different professions, internships, they can travel, they can learn, they can be of service, they can do volunteer work, even abroad. Different programs offer that, and they can learn and mature over that year and maybe come back to the table with, you know what, I thought I wanted to do this. I definitely don't. I think now I want to do this and have a better picture, because the one thing that you should not do for college is go 4 years, rack up lots of student loan debt, and get a degree that either A, isn't usable, doesn't get a job that pays well, or B, is a degree that they now have learned that they don't want to use. That's a mistake. I can say that. That's a blanket statement. And so, yeah, making sure your child at least feels fairly confident that degree is going to be something they will actually use.
So I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I was actually a philosophy major. So I'm not really sure what I would have done if I didn't go to med school, but that might be one of those degrees that aren't the most profitable.
Yeah, I would stay away. I would steer for the philosophy major. Yeah.
So what do you say to those that say that this is great to say you're going to be financially free as a young person, or these people that are able to do it, it's because they worked for Google and they, got all kinds of stock options or whatever. Like that, this is pie in the sky thinking that you just have to get a job. You're going to work till you're 65. Like, how do you address those people that just are so skeptic of this idea?
Yeah, I don't blame them. I think most people are skeptic of the idea of early financial independence, which by definition, at least for me, means that someone no longer has to work for the rest of their life. They're set for life. They have enough passive income or enough savings and investments where they no longer have to work. They absolutely can, and most do, because the type of person that reaches early financial independence isn't someone that just sits still. They're going to continue to produce and create and contribute, but on their own terms after financial independence. So, I think the only thing I can say to those people who are skeptical is it's a proven method. Early financial independence is happening. Hundreds and hundreds of people are doing it every year, every month, probably. There are lots of case studies, some are in my book, of people who have done it at a very early age. I will not sit here and say that it's something everyone should do. Financial independence is not for everybody. Real estate investing is not for everybody. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. But I do think it's important that young people know that is an option, and maybe they want to pursue it or learn more about it. Maybe they don't, but at least now they have a choice. So if people are skeptical about the idea of early financial independence, I don't blame them. But if you do some research, you'll find that it's absolutely real. It works. It's just a numbers game. It's a really simple numbers game around, having enough money. I'll give you an example. If, some of your listeners might be real estate investors, and those produce passive income, mostly passive income, but income nonetheless. And if someone's living frugally at age 30, frugal doesn't mean cheap, by the way. It just means they're not spending on things they don't value. And they're only spending $50,000 a year all in, and their real estate's bringing in that much or more. They can quit their job and they'll be fine. But again, that person's probably not going to quit their job and do nothing ever again. They're going to earn more somehow, some way. So it'll just increase the idea that they're even more financially independent. And here's the worst case scenario. If someone quits their job or, is enjoying financial independence for a few years and then figure out that it's not working the way they thought, then they just go back and get a job. I mean, it's the worst case scenario is what you were doing before. It's what everyone else is already doing.
Exactly. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize that. Don't take the time to really think about it. Like, what's the worst that could happen? You do what you're doing already. Like,
you have to go back and get a full-time job again.
Yeah.
And there are people like me, like I have a full-time job that I love. And so I choose to keep working. And there's nothing wrong with that option either. Even if you're financially independent, you can continue to do what you're doing. If you're a physician and you're financially independent, you can continue to be a physician for as long as you want. But now you have much more power and opportunities that might come your way that you couldn't take advantage of if you were living kind of the paycheck to paycheck, or, you had very little savings or investments. Those now are very viable opportunities that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. You could volunteer the free clinic. You could decide what cases you want to do, what patients you want to see, and not have to choose whatever is going to pay the most, whatever surgery is going to be the most profitable, or whatever. So if we do have, teenagers at home, or we have nieces, nephews in that age range, how do we get this book in their hands? What's the best way to find you and to find the book?
Yeah, the book, which is called First to a Million, the subtitle is A Teenager's Guide to Early Financial Independence, published by Bigger Pockets. So obviously you can get it on Bigger Pockets website. You can also find it anywhere else that books are sold. There's also a second piece. There's a workbook that kind of is part 2 of the book. And the workbook is just called the First to a Million Workbook. So they do go together. That is only available on Bigger Pockets website right now. And if you buy both together, you get a nice discount from Bigger Pockets. It's a great introduction for anyone to the early financial independence movement, strategies, concepts, ideas, tactics. I wrote the book for teenagers, but I think honestly, anybody at 30, 40, 50 years old who's just kind of starting to learn about this stuff would get a lot of value from the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I read it over the weekend, and it had lots of great tidbits, even I think for people that have been around the movement before. Like it's very inspiring. You've like you mentioned, some of the people that have done it and some parts of your community, and what they're doing and how they're getting there at early ages. And I think it's a great job that you're doing and helping these young people out. Can you tell us a little bit more about your group your online group too? Yeah,
definitely. The online group, it's an online community called Sheeks Freaks. It's kind of a funny name, but the book First to a Million has a theme. It's a freak theme to it. And the idea behind that is that if you are young and you think about your financial future and you're spending time educating yourself, whether that's a YouTube video or a podcast or a book or social media, that is not normal. Young people don't typically spend time learning about money and finances and early financial independence. So they're different, they're unique, they're exceptional. And so they're a little freakish because they're different in a good way, right? So the community is called Sheeks Freaks. It's for 15 to 25-year-olds. That's not a hard line, but that's the span of ages that I tend to work with. And we have an online platform where we have weekly Zoom meetings. We have guest speakers. They engage with each other, share resources. They're accountable to each other. They post questions and answer each other's questions. It's an amazing thing to watch because these young people who are super motivated about these topics, when they get around like-minded people, which is what this community is for, they just start to, snowball, and they just start to achieve at a very high level. We've had some members do some really amazing things at very young ages, which I think is not so much me, it's them being around and connected to other young people who think just like they do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And absolutely, your network is, as cliche as it is your net worth, and you're gonna be just like whoever you surround yourself with. So I really appreciate you joining us, Dan, and everyone go out and grab a copy of First to a Million and get it to those young adults that you care about, because I think it'll be very helpful to them.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us,
Adam. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Dads Before Doctors podcast. Family men who are doctors rather than doctors who have families. In an evolving and ever fast-paced world, we cannot lose sight of our real priorities. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had fun. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And tell a friend about the show. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at dadsbeforedoctors.com. Questions, comments, suggestions? email adam@dadsbefore.doctors.com. And find us on Facebook and Instagram at Dads Before Doctors. Remember, the host of this show is not your doctor, your coach, or your financial advisor. This show is strictly for entertainment. Till next time, this is Dads Before Doctors, signing off.